raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
You cannot use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. That's Maya Angelou. And then to follow that, creativity is intelligence having fun. That's Albert Einstein. And then from Pablo Picasso, others have seen what it is and asked why. I have seen what it could be and asked why not. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness, the show where we explore the intersection of mindfulness, masculinity, and mental health. I'm John McCaskill, and I'm joined by my co-host over there, Will Schneider. And in today's episode, we are joined by Rich Harris, a music composer, filmmaker, storyteller, and philanthropist who has a passion for helping disadvantaged teenagers through music and creativity. Now, I'm going to break from the norm here. You're going to notice once we start actually jump into this, you're going to notice, hey, I recognize Rich's voice. Well, that's because Rich is just awesome. And he reached out to us one day and he asked, hey, how can I help the show? And he put together our incredible intro that you just heard, our outro at the end of the show, and this amazing trailer.
I love this.
Life is complicated. Most of us get up every morning asking ourselves a litany of questions. Am I doing the best job I can at work? Am I succeeding as a father, a husband, a brother and friend? As a member of a society that demands men meet certain expectations, dismissing our emotional capacity and oversimplifying our existences, men are not typically encouraged to face their fears, insecurities, and trauma head-on, essentially robbing us and ultimately our loved ones the opportunity to live a full life of authenticity and honesty. One that we owe ourselves and those closest to us. While we all come from different backgrounds and have challenges and lifestyles that are unique to every individual, the one common thread we do have is our capacity for love and healing. Rigorous honesty, open minds, and real organic conversation are what humans need to thrive and grow. Here on the Men Talking Mindfulness show, we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives unpack some of these complex challenges by leveraging meditation and mindfulness practices. Each discussion is an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on vulnerability, authenticity, and inner peace. Please join us, John McCaskill and Will Schneider, every week for a new episode. For more information on how to get a hold of us, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.
Just love that, man. Thank you so much for putting that together for us, Rich. It's just fantastic and fits exactly what we want to do with this show and what we are doing, thanks to people like you that are helping us out. So I'm going to go a little bit further into your bio here for our audience. Rich's personal journey has been marked by struggles with ADHD, anxiety, and childhood trauma resulting from emotional and physical abuse by his late father, a Vietnam War veteran, and repeated sexual abuse by a non-family member. Later in life, during his divorce, Rich discovered mindfulness, which led to a series of realizations. Despite undergoing therapy, he still had to deal with guilt, shame, low self-esteem, and anger. Mindfulness and creativity provided Rich with solace, and he has since become a beacon of hope for others. And in this discussion, we will delve into Rich's story and explore how mindfulness helped him find joy and positivity in life. Gents, how are you guys? Great to see you.
Hey, welcome. I'm on the show. Thanks for having me. That's what happens when I do my own podcast. And so I'm
That's
like,
right.
hey, I'm on the other side of the fence now. Okay.
Totally done that.
Well, you're kind of part of our podcast, Rich, with that intro. Like every time we hear your voice. So it's like, so the three of us have united, which I think is just incredible. It's great to be here. Good to see you, John. Good to see you, Rich.
You too. Will, I'm going to turn it over to you quick, man.
Yeah.
How are you been?
So, if you want to help us grow the show, leave us a review. That's a great way to kind of up our ranking a little bit and get the word out there and more visibility for people if they're searching for mindfulness. Share it on your social media platforms that you're understanding mindfulness in a deeper way by listening to Men Talking Mindfulness. Also, hey, if you want, we have a free mindfulness workbook, and you can get this by texting mindful to 33777. Again, that's 33777. And lastly, our YouTube is waiting for you to join if you haven't already. And you can hit up our YouTube and see different snippets and different things we're adding to the YouTube page, and go to youtube.com/@mentalkingmindfulness. Again, that's youtube.com/@mentalkingmindfulness. And let's just dive in, guys. I'm excited for this conversation about creativity. It's been such a big part of my life. It's something that I work with. I'm creative. I live a creative life. So I'm excited to dive in here from Rich. And I think we need to do our grounding practice first.
Practice, yeah, man.
I got this.
Yeah.
All right. So let's ground ourselves in a great way. This can also help you to kind of hit that, maybe tap that energy of creativity just by doing a little bit of grounding. And it could just be as simple as what we're going to practice right now. We're just going to do 5 parachute breaths. So we're going to take a significant inhale through the nose and then take a very long, prolonged exhalation through the mouth. So ground yourself, close your eyes, if that's possible, if you like, or if that's safe for you. Let's exhale out the mouth. All the way out, empty, empty, empty. We're going to take that like kind of big hit of an inhale and exhale slowly out. Keep going, empty all the way out, hit that bottom, feel that bottom, and another inhale. And as you exhale and really elongate this exhale, feel your body just kind of melting and grounding you deeper in here now again. Longer, slower, smoother exhale, creating an internal environment matching that exhale. 2 more. Last one. All right. We're back. Maybe move a little bit. Get that little micro movements John's like to say. We learned about that from I forget who, but it's helpful. Just kind of get the energy flowing, juices flowing. And let's just jump right in, shall we?
Yeah.
So Rich, please, can you tell us a little bit more about your personal journey with mindfulness and creativity, and how it's helped you overcome some of the challenges that we kind of spoke of in your bio and also in your childhood?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been thanks for having me, by the way. This is your show, not my show. I won't say welcome again. So I've been obsessed with sort of the auditory experience of everything since I was a kid. And then my dad always played, 12-string guitar. I was fortunately raised on a ton of music. Like he was 100% responsible for exposing me to everything from big band in the 20s and 30s to like all the old blues stuff, Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, James Cotton, all the way into like classic rock in the boomer sense, not the Gen X sense. So classic rock, Led Zeppelin, Skinner, all that stuff. And then, and so I got like a nice foundation there, and Motown was a big thing too. So funk and soul, R&B stuff. So hearing all that stuff at a really young age, I got obsessed with it at a young age. So I could be seen sitting down on the floor in front of the stereo with this big clumsy 80s headphones on, going through a bunch of tapes, cassette tapes and stuff. And then eventually when I started playing instruments at around 12 or 13 years old and learning how to read music and stuff like that, then I just got even more obsessed. And then it's pretty much everything that I've always done has somehow revolved around music as far as like what I love to do, so since then. And then as far as my childhood is concerned, so music has definitely been a vessel of relief, I would say, most of my life. Like you mentioned in the intro, my dad was in Vietnam. He was a U.S. Marine from 67 to 70. Purple Heart, whole bunch of other medals I have here floating around here somewhere. But that was a tough war. And his job, the job that my dad had, you don't hear about that often. You hear about either somebody's got an administrative job, but they fly a jet, or they swim in the water, or they're in the trenches shooting guns and stuff. But you don't hear about my dad's job. And what he did was, his job was to go to an office first thing in the morning, pick up top secret crypto documents, have them handcuffed to his wrist. He was given a 9mm and a cyanide capsule.
Oh,
and then he was told to go sit in a helicopter for, 6 to 8 hours, just flying over hot territory, getting shot at all day, hearing that little like tick, 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 tick you hear in the helicopter, and then see all that fiberglass come floating down in front of you. And so every day he would get up for like a year straight and be like, I'm going to die today.
Wow.
So you think about that, and then you're like, not to get all choked up right now, but it's just, it's like, how do you do that? And he was a very sensitive, creative person too, like me. And how do you like go back home, and just be like, especially in that era when people were, there were a lot of people that were talking shit about soldiers and blaming them for stuff and calling them, murderers and baby butchers and baby killers and all this bullshit. And it's like, how do you expect them to come back and be able to do things like hold down a job? Let's just, let's have and raise some children, and pay rent, just do all these like normal things after, all that trauma and like extensive sustained emotional anxiety and stress and stuff too, and he got his Purple Heart came from when he was in a helicopter one day, and somebody on the ground had an M60 just pointed straight up, and, he got shot in the butt cheek, but his friend the bullet came up right through his femur and basically just blew his leg apart all over the helicopter.
Jeez.
And it was just madness, right? And then after they landed, everybody got triaged, taken care of, whatever. I mean, my dad had to go back up because his wound just wasn't that serious, and just keep doing it. So like, and his childhood, his dad was very old school accountant type, who was like, the old 1950s dad, just super hardcore, very judgmental, definitely like kind of emotionally abusive. If my dad was a 9-year-old and didn't do very well at the baseball game, as an outfielder or something, he would just be super critical of him, my grandpa would, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that too, that he would carried with him. And he said the only reason why he even joined the service was to get as far away from his father as possible.
Wow.
So carry all that in. And then so I had a household where, because my parents were definitely stunted emotionally, they didn't have the benefit of the environments of promoting therapy and the idea of getting counseling and stuff like that. And back then, there's still a lot of old school tough guy misogyny bullshit that was just layered into American society. And because of that, my parents, they were just super dysfunctional, and I didn't get a lot of physical affection. And so when you are a child who is emotional and needs a lot of physical affection, but you're not getting it at home, you seek that out in other ways. And so this is where the sexual abuse came in, is people that are sexual abusers, they have this masterful radar for finding children that do not have affection at home, that have needs, that need to be listened to, that need to feel nurtured, stuff like that. There's like the scary versions of the child abusers out there, and then there's the ones that they just know how to get into the kid's head, but also make them not say anything about what's going on. So when I was abused, I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. It was by a neighbor, and he was so nice. There was nothing to fear. There was nothing to stress out about. There was no anger, violence, or anything like that. But that's how they get you, right? And then that just happened for a little while. And then when that was done, I didn't even tell my dad that happened to me until I was like 21. and he just like lost his mind, you know. And I'm like,
How old are you during the abuse time?
I was
what
like,
was
I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, something like that.
Really young. Okay.
And but like I said, it was never a threatening experience. It was very subversive. You know, like I said, abusers know how to play that game. They know how to find children that are in that vulnerable, weakened headspace emotionally, and they know that they need affection. They know that they need validation, and they know how to leverage their starvation for physical affection by bringing sexuality into there and confusing the entire thing. And so the end result after your abuse is you are so, when you're a child, you know, that means certain things in your body and your brain have been activated prematurely. And now your view of what love is and what is attached to that is very confusing.
Sure.
And so like, it just screws you. Like in all your relationships, you're confused by, you know, sex means love or love means sex, or I don't even know what both of those mean. And how am I supposed to even look at those things? And then if you don't have any guidance from your parents, plus you were abused, you got a lot of work to do, basically, you know? And so that's where I was fortunate enough that a lot of people in my life at a young age, and by young, I just mean like 19, 20 years old, so I just somehow was fortunate enough to the universe steered me to therapy, you know. So in my early 20s, started down the path of therapy, working through. There was 2 tracks I was on. One was I had a shit ton of anger toward my parents, and then the other one was, how do I not feel like a useless, shameful, guilt-ridden pile of crap because I was abused? Because when you're abused, you blame all that stuff on yourself, especially when you're a kid, right? It's all your fault. I did this. I caused all this grief, you know, and this horrible thing that happened to me is somehow my fault. And so therapy helps you undo those things, work through them, kind of like they do in the military, in that, you know, when you first start in the military, they strip your entire existence away from yourself emotionally and then rebuild you back up. At least that's their goal as a soldier, right? And so that's what I was basically, those were the exercises that I went through in therapy, was let's tear all this stuff down. A house was built inside of me on a really horrible foundation, in some cases no foundation. And so now I need to take all that down. It's demo time, you know, let's go knock that shit down, not be in denial that it exists, but rebuild it back in a way that's healthy, where it's like, oh yeah, I now have a room in my new house where I house my memories and the things that influenced who I was and what I do and why I behave the way I do, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But now they're in their own room. I'm aware of them. I know what they are. When, you know, a certain old pattern starts to well up inside, I can very easily recognize it before it even gets close to my brain, you know, and like take over time. So I know how to manage it. And now I can use that insight and empathy associated with that to help others, that I can sense, you know, I'm definitely an empath, and I have a hypervigilance about me that just comes from being, you know, a child of trauma, basically. You know, you get hypervigilance, you know, it's ridiculous. The kind of vigilance that kids shouldn't even have to have, you know, really. But you know, fast forward to now, you know, now like as an adult, and since I had gotten therapy, I've been really good about setting boundaries with people and making sure that I only have people in my life that, number one, are either going to teach me even healthier things to think about and ways of doing things, or people that I know are struggling, that, you know, like you brought up the teenager thing earlier, that I know I understand where they're at and I can help them in a way that makes them feel not alone, basically.
So you went down the counseling path, the therapy path. In the bio, I mentioned that you'd sought that out, but you still felt as though you had some unturned rocks that you needed to flip over and see what was under there. Can you talk about how you came through therapy, or maybe in addition to therapy, to mindfulness, and then using creativity as part of your healing journey?
Yeah, for sure. So the mindfulness thing, so I had met my first wife when I was 15, right? And because we were both super codependent, you know, we ended up getting married at 18, you know, pregnant 21, 23, and 29. And so we had 3 kids, you know, before we were even 30, and super immature. Fortunately, you know, her and I today are still good friends. She's an awesome person, great mom, and we've been through a lot together. And so we have that. But like through my divorce, when I started going through that divorce with her, we got together super young. So emotionally, in the context of a relationship with a partner, I was super stunted, super immature. So when we had that divorce, it was like it just ripped the largest Band-Aid off of all of these things that, because I never allowed myself to just be an adult without being married and stuff like that and having children, I hadn't unpacked any of that crap at the level that I thought I had. And so all of a sudden this, like, you know, all the codependence and the shame and the guilt and all these things came just shooting out the top like Old Faithful during my divorce. And so it felt unbearable, you know, a lot of the time at first. And then I read a book called The First Girl That I Dated After My Divorce, which I had no business dating anybody after my divorce. I was a total disaster, right? But I was so codependent. I was like, I don't know.
I was just going to say,
how do I not be married? I need to find somebody so I can feel like I'm still married or whatever. But she was kind of I live in Santa Cruz, right? So there's an abundance of, you know, the hippie stereotype. Some good. Some of them are really great. Some of them super annoying. But she was a sweetheart. And she introduced me to this book called Dharma Punks. And basically it was written by Noah Levine. Everybody in Santa Cruz knows who this guy is. And he kind of helped start that movement where it was like he came from a background of like, you know, latchkey kid, getting in trouble, you know, tattoos, fights, you know, drugs, like all that stuff. And then he basically, that book really showed me that somebody that can be as angry and feel as chaotic and emotional as me actually could have a path out. And it didn't involve, you know, the super hardcore, staunch Christian bombardment that I was getting growing up, which was also, you know, looking back after I started to do a lot of meditation and stuff, I was like, how can my parents go to church and then profess all of these things, but then this is our home dynamic? Like I couldn't make sense out of that. And so when I finally discovered Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness, I was like, okay, this actually makes sense. And it's something that I can control and actually do for myself. So I started to do that, started to read other books, you know, that are along the same lines where like edgy, angry people can find mindfulness and actually totally change their entire tune and their perspective on the things that turn them into who they were before learning about it, basically. And then I guess the music side of it was, before I discovered mindfulness, I was in a lot of metal bands, you know, and everybody in my band had the same issue. We all hated our dads, right?
Yeah, getting your rage out. I can imagine getting your rage out, anger.
Yeah, you're playing metal. You hate your dad. Got it. All right. Yeah. welcome to the club. So it was like the louder we can play, the faster we could play, the more pissed off we can be on stage, then we can attract more people in the crowd who also have daddy issues, right? So that was and that actually created some tension between my father and I for a while when he was still alive, because when I started playing in this one band, we were doing really well, and then I showed him the liner notes, you know, and I wasn't the singer, I was just the drummer. But the singer, who had tons of daddy issues as well, was super pissed off at his dad. Like every single song was about a father figure, you know. And so my dad read it and he got all upset and he was like, I don't want to be the poster dad for your freaking angry band about whatever, you know. And I'm like, well, I'm just the drummer, first of all. But I'm like, Dad, you know, you have to accept the fact that, like, you're my father. You play a role in how I turned out, just like your dad played a role, you know, blah, 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 all the way up the chain, right? And like, this isn't I'm not trying to humiliate you or call you out, but, you know, music is how I get these feelings and all this stuff that's going on. I get it to make sense. and get it out of my system, and deal with it. So playing in hard rock bands like really gave me a positive channel to like get that energy out and hang out with like-minded dudes who were going through the same shit. And so we didn't feel like aliens when we were together. It was more like a family of like dysfunctional angry dad hating kids, whatever. But over time, what music has done for me since then is it really helps to enhance the telling of meaningful stories when it's in the background. And people don't realize when they're watching a film, you could literally be watching the shittiest movie you've ever seen in your life. But if the music score is compelling and interesting, your subconscious is telling you, oh, this is a really great movie. But if you were to like strip that music away, you'd be like, this is garbage. And I've seen the inverse true as well, where a film looks beautiful, it's shot, the story's great, the acting's amazing, and whoever was hired to do the music supervision should be fired and drawn and quartered. It just ruined a really good film, right? And so that also is the case. So the audio side really helps people feel the things that you want them to feel, when you're delivering some kind of experience like that, or media, creative. And I just love that. I love that I can bring something in that they're not even thinking about and actually integrate with their emotional capacity and their emotional state while they take in another sensory input. And I just think it's really fascinating and cool. And all my favorite films have the best scores that I've ever heard,
How many of them are Hans Zimmer or Max Richter?
There's quite a few. Yeah, there's quite a few.
Oh, they're classic.
Yeah, they are.
Hans is definitely like the man, you don't even have to question that dude, but there's plenty of others as well. Danny Elfman and Clint Mansell. There's a movie called Moon that you should see that you will just love the soundtrack.
Oh, I've heard this. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
I'm a total space dork too. So combining
Same.
outer space with Sam Rockwell and that Moon, that whole story, and it was just incredible. So I highly recommend that.
Nice.
Anyhow, yeah.
Well, no, I just want to go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Just real quick, just a comment. Before we got into the music piece, you were talking about kind of your former life, if you will, or your earlier life, and how you found meditation and it's really helped you out. And there's a lot of tough guys now who are starting to find meditation and it's good for them. Well, Will and I are working on our book and it's going to be entitled Mindfulness for Assholes. We've gotten some blowback, but we've mostly gotten positive feedback on that. But within the book, there's going to be a tale of two assholes. And the one that just goes through life, and at the very end of his life, looks back and has a lot of regret and never really changed the way that he was. And then the other one is, very similar path, but at some point he is enlightened, and that is through mindfulness. And we want the readers to be able to resonate with both of them and see, hey, you know what? I've been this guy, or I don't want to be this guy, so I'm going to lean in on mindfulness, meditation, and all things that surround them. So, hey, for our listeners, that book's coming out sometime soon. So be on the lookout. Shameless plug.
I think it's like, I was going to say, you can also add to the fact that you might not just be one or the other guy. You might have just those people in your life.
For sure.
That make life difficult, So that's another thing too. I know a lot of people that are super stable and self-aware, but they're having a hard time dealing with somebody that fits that description you just said.
Yep.
So that's another angle, just giving us some more tools. So anyway, go ahead, Will. I interrupted you.
No, all good. Another discussion for the book, John, for sure. Like, it's like the satellite assholes around us, you know what I mean? And their gravitational asshole pull, and how it works in our mind or something, right? But since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, like, we've kind of mentioned, you mentioned the book and like kind of the path to two assholes, now a third, or one that kind of is there, but also Rich, you're talking, about how creativity allowed you to kind of exercise and exorcise some of that, your history, your father issues and stuff like that. And, and what creativity has done for me. And I just want to we'll talk about creativity as like kind of what it means maybe to us or to you. As well, Rich. I mean, you're our guest today, so of course. But it's like it could be an outlet, and for and a place to kind of like put that stuff, put that emotional energy, put the things that are getting in our way, or and allow creativity and whatever the expression is, whether it's playing, in music, or whether you're, either maybe potting plants, or, drawing, or painting, or some way. Like there's something about creative energy that allows us to, change, channel, and kind of move this energy through us. And I feel like there's a lot of like men out there, a lot of masculine types that don't look in this direction as a means to heal, or a means, or as an outlet, just to, like, again, let this creative, at our core, we're creative beings, but to get in touch with that creative being that we have inside of each of us could be a way of of incredible personal growth, which we've all experienced. But also a way of transforming the world around you, and helping you, maybe eradicate some blind spots that kind of are in your way, and to helping you see what's possible, or what's next for you, or even like deepen your relationships in some way, because you're no longer just habitually showing up in the same form with the same habits, but creativity is just bringing more of flavor to your life, and helping you to kind of like expand your horizons, if you will.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I would say creativity for me, like the way. So when you're a child, right, you are born you start out with a level of freedom, mental freedom, emotional
mhm,
freedom, and being creative when you're doing something for yourself creatively, in my opinion, regardless of what kind of life you lived or what has impacted your life, that creative freedom that you take for yourself as somebody, who's my age, 48 years old, it's as close as you can get as an adult to getting back to experiencing that freedom you had as a child.
yeah. Mhm.
And so for me, when I'm able to, make music, or write a guitar part, or like shoot some cool like slow-mo film stuff in nature, and then put some of my own music to it, or whatever, it's kind of funny. Like I'll be listening to some song that I did, and it's not because I'm impressed with myself. It's more just because I'm feeling what it is that I wrote when I listen to it, listen back to it. But I'll just like burst into tears. No reason. I'm not sad. I'm not mad or
Right.
unhappy or scared or anxious. It's just like this. It's this freedom that you get to just output. And again, I feel like one of the reasons why it's capable of healing people, no matter how fast or slow that process is, it's because it gets you close again back to that childhood state where
Uh,
you had that freedom before, where you knew that if you went outside that day and you had a roof over your head, if you're fortunate enough to have the bills paid or food, as a kid growing up. I remember you get up in the morning on Saturday, there's no school, and you just, all you can think about, and the only thing filling your entire fucking head is just jumping on your bicycle after that bowl of Cheerios, and then enjoying, or like day one of summer, when you're like
mm,
10 years old, like when school gets out, and you're just
yeah.
like, and it's like, I feel like that's what creativity can do for adults and people that just have busy lives, or are looking for a new outlet. There's no boundaries. If you sit down at a canvas and you paint, or you want to journal and write about topics,
Right.
you're a dancer or a musician or whatever, it really doesn't matter. It brings you back to that place. And I think that that's
Yeah.
where the kind of intrinsic benefit happens.
I feel like it's also like innocence that you know what I mean. That we still have that innocence inside of us. It's there.
Forever.
I
Yeah.
feel forever, exactly. And what you're describing, I feel like put you in touch with that innocence, like that kind of like there's an almost it's just a constant. And when you really begin to access those creative veins, whether you're dancing, playing music, or doing some other form of art, like you begin to commune once again with that innocence, and with that freedom that you're talking about has been my experience. And it can be very, like you mentioned, very emotional in some ways. Like I've
Yeah.
heard a friend of mine who's a fantastic musician. He goes, sometimes I just can't pick up the guitar because it just melts. I just
Yeah.
melt, like I just crying fully, like, oh my God. I feel that, when I'm teaching in class, and it's like, I do have things I want to do in class, but how I do those things just, I just get into kind of a creative flow. And then sometimes it gets so overwhelmed with like what's going on in the class and the feeling and the vibe that I'm just like, oh my God, I really should be crying right now. I still have to run this class the next half hour. You know what I mean? But it's just like I get overwhelmed. And it's like, it's like again, tapping that the creative innocence that's within all of us. That's so important. And to just have that be a part of our lives, to attach to that as often as we can.
100%.
Yeah.
I like the analogy of school too, right? I've got a young daughter. I've got 3 young kids, and my oldest daughter is, about to have her first summer vacation. And I can see that she's looking forward to that summer vacation. But also it makes me think, I don't know if you've ever read any of Sir Ken Robinson's books or seen his TED Talks. For the listeners and for you guys too, check him out after this. He has a great TED Talk on whether or not school kills creativity. And, I fully believe in school. I fully believe in education, but I also believe that there's improvements that can be made. And one of the things that we can improve is the ability to tap into the creative brain, the creative mind. And in Sir Ken Robinson's talk and in his books, he talks about this young lady who was really struggling in school, like was not able to sit still, had what appeared to be ADHD, and was taken out of school. And her parents took her to a counselor, and the counselor was like, "Hey, look, can I just have a few minutes alone with her? Let me see if I can talk to her." And the counselor speaks with her, and then goes and gets the parents, and the young girl is dancing around the room. And she's like, she doesn't have any problems. She's just creative. She needs to go to a dance school. And she goes to a dance school and thrives and becomes this unbelievable ballet dancer. But because of what society acknowledges as what's smart, we think that, somebody who's up and bouncing around in school, that they're a problem child. And we crush that. We're like, sit still, go to detention, take some ADHD medicine. It's crushing when I think about that. And I've got young kids, right? And I want them to be valuable and contributing members of society, but I also want them to be able to tap into that creative side. And I don't want school to squash that. So I try to, as much as possible, as parents, we try to allow them the ability to tap into that creative side, but you only have so many opportunities as a parent. I wish we as society celebrated creativity as much as we do the ability to do math or the ability to do some type of engineering. And I mean, those aren't mutually exclusive either. You can be a mathematician and be creative. You can be an engineer and be creative, obviously.
Right.
But more often than not, they're looked at school, the STEM. What is it? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? And that they've just now started calling it STEAM, where you add in art to it, which is great. Yeah. So, it's important for our brains. It's important for our souls, and it can heal what we've been through. It can be healing for what we are going through at the same time. So
it's important for society too.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, that was a long tirade. But
No, it's good. It's actually, that's good because you just teed up my tirade about the public school system. So
go for it.
The biggest problem that I've had is, I grew up in a house that was pretty cash poor. Like we didn't have a lot of money. My dad was horrible with money. Extremely talented artist, landscape architect, graduated with honors from Cal Poly, but he was like emotionally, he had a lot of anxiety about getting work, and he also has a huge problem with people telling him what to do. So he wouldn't work for anybody either. So, he's
that's me.
Me too. It's tough.
That's 3.
I do have a day job, and I actually have a really great team and a great boss now. But the bosses that I've had the biggest problems with are the ones that feel like they got to be all up in my shit the whole time. And it's also in our DNA. In my family, I have 3 sons. They're almost 28, 26, and almost 21. None of us like being told what to do. So it's just who we are. It's what we do. But the thing is like. So back to the school thing, I remember going to school And then eventually, once you get to high school, I had all these friends that they did have money. Their parents did have money. And so around sophomore year and junior year, they're teeing up the discussions about which university to go to and which college. And I have zero issue with going to college. I think higher education is great. Why would we not want to promote that, right? But the problem is that, at least in American culture, we have these kids, we have every single child that we're trying to make them think that that's the track. Like if you don't go to college right after high school, or if you don't follow the traditional high school like thing where it's like, I'm this well-rounded guy who does all these things and I have to go to math 6 and make sure I get a C- in it to pass. Like all this just like bullshit. And like, I remember being in high school as a creative, I was taking like 8,000 music classes in high school, and I was taking the bare freaking minimum of every other subject except for poetry. I did take a bunch of that too. But I just remember sitting in those classes, and my biggest problem, the reason why I got kicked out all the time is like, I kept talking and screwing around because I just didn't understand why I had to be there based on who I was. Like I want to make music and paint and do things like that and be creative and try improv theater and stuff like that. And, the less math you do and the less English and the less science you did back then, it's like the more you're frowned upon and you're looked at, like you said, John, as like this like weirdo who can't keep their shit together. You're the trouble child who can't sit still and you won't stop joking around and talking. But nobody back then was sitting down going, you know what? I'm not sure this is a good fit for Rich, not because he's not capable, but because this is just not the type of environment that fosters his particular chemical makeup. I never got that feedback, nor did I see other creatives getting those provisions made for them, unless you happen to have a shit ton of money and could go to some very special school for the arts, because those are the places that exist and they're great, but they're expensive. They're not the norm. And like, what are the first things to get cut in public education when the budget goes down? It's not sports. It sure as hell isn't the math program. Yeah. I don't see the football team out selling candy bars so that they can get new helmets, right? But all the choir students, you can bet your ass, are having to learn how to be door-to-door salesmen selling candy and all this other horse shit, just to get real basic stuff to support their arts education, And so the problem is that our society views school and how we should send kids to school and what we should have them do. We are trying to make sure that there's a percentage of people that end out in the workforce that can make the P&L statement for a large corporation look good.
For sure. 100%.
And that does not apply to artists. I'm sorry. Like, that's why artists are broke. That's why we joke about the drummer who lives on his girlfriend's couch, because we're creatives and we don't have a society that perpetuates abstract creative behavior unless there's revenue tied to it.
Right.
That's why teachers are underpaid, because if you invest in teachers and children now, they're not going to make anybody's short-term profits go up because you're investing in a long-term future. And so we've built our entire education system around that. And now, how is an artist supposed to end up on the right track if that whole thing I just said is literally part of our culture from the ground up? Like, how does an artist survive that? Seriously. And it's like, you can find a million software developer jobs, they're like dime a dozen. But if I go look for, somebody who's there to do Foley, like sound effects and stuff for film, or like write custom music and stuff, there's never going to be an abundance of those jobs ever, because we don't facilitate that, because again, it doesn't help a large corporation at the end of the day.
Yeah, very true. And it's a bottom line.
It's that old, it's that saying, I think it's attributed to Einstein as well. I don't know if he actually did say it, but something about, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then it will always think that it's stupid. And
totally.
I think that's what we do in society, is that we judge people's skills differently. Hey, if you have a skill in art or some type of creative, but you're not good at math, then we think of you as lesser. Right, you're not passing the standardized test. Where on the standardized test does it ask you to write creatively or draw creatively or paint or make music? It doesn't. And yeah, it's a sad thing. But I think, sorry, I took us down a sidetrack there.
No.
And it's an important conversation. And if you're listening and you have some ideas of how we can change school or change education for our kids' future so that creatives can, in fact, bloom and blossom in their own right, then let us, we'd love to know about that. We'd love to hear about that.
We'd love to have you on the show.
We'd love to have you on the show.
Come talk to us. And, so why don't we just dive into, so Rich, if like one of our listeners out there, it's like, they're kind of stuck in a job and they just feel stuck all over because they're just kind of repeating the same patterns of life. It's like, what would you, what advice would you offer to kind of get those creative juices flowing, and to kind of get in, feel that creative energy we've been talking about?
I think being open. Obviously, there's a lot of information I don't have about that because it's kind of high level, right? About this the individual person or whatever. But I would just say open. Two things. One is, this is going to sound super hippie right now, but one is get out in nature.
Not at all.
Stick your bare feet in the ground. Sand, mud, dirt, water.
Yeah.
Like,
I've got no shoes on right now.
I don't care who you are. Yeah, right. Exactly. Are you standing in the dirt right now?
No, I'm not. I can't do what Will just did, though. I won't prove it. Otherwise, I'll fall back into my green screen back there.
I would say doing that and disconnecting from all electronics. Like, we all have to do that for our jobs to some degree, or our businesses, Let's go somewhere and literally just pick a 4-hour block of time. If you just want to start small, once a week, where you don't have a phone, there's no TV, nobody's asking you for shit, if you can help it, and just go somewhere quietly. Just do that for like even 1 hour a week makes a huge difference. I can have a totally horrible week, and then I live in Santa Cruz, so I'm close to the beach, so I'm super fortunate there. And I'm actually close to Redwoods too, but if I have a horrible week, I can go drive out to some beach. It took me, 15 minutes to get there, and just have my feet in the sand and feel the breeze for 5 minutes. And I feel like the whole week just like washed away.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So the break from electronics and the grounding thing, and what those two things, if you bring those into your life, at least for me, it opened up some other doors. I started thinking about things that I've always wanted to do that I haven't tried yet.
Right.
Like, try something new. Like, you think you'd be a horrible painter? I couldn't think of a better reason to then go try it.
Yes. You
think you're going to be a shitty salsa dancer, but you've always wanted to try it? Well, go out there and be shitty and start being the shittiest salsa dancer anybody has ever seen. Because if you're out there doing it and you're trying it, you're not going to have these untapped wishes and hopes and voids.
Right.
Like I talk to my wife about this all the time. She's like such a wonderful, sweet person, but the way she was raised, she was always, because she's so sweet, she was always raised to be this like supportive person for everybody else around her, and not encouraged to explore her own creativity, which she has a metric shit ton of in her. So it's like, now, instead of talking about how you'd always like to do this, one day I'm going to learn Photoshop, or one day I'm going to start a journal or a blog or whatever. Like, stop saying one day I will ... Because we all know that the universe moves quickly, and that our existence here is less than a nanosecond of a frickin' pin. Like, we're nothing. We could all die tomorrow in the apocalypse. And so what I suggest is like, come up with a short list of things you've always wanted to do, but you never thought you would be good at. Do those things, even on a small scale, seriously. And like, you'll start to find that because you took that step, you'll start to feel a little bit more empowered about your own future and how you spend your time. And it will lead exponentially, as long as you keep doing it, to you'll start to switch the priority of your time to doing things I have to do, to doing things I want to do that actually bring me satisfaction and fulfillment while I'm here. Right. And then all of a sudden you're going to see in real time your whole life, and the shape of it is going to change into something else, something that's more fulfilling and satisfying and whatever. You might still have that day job you don't like that much, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you bring this other color and these other things into your life, and infuse that into your week, things change. Outlook changes. You become happier from the inside.
Google started doing that. Like, I think 4 days a week, people do whatever it is they normally do. And then 20% of their week, so one day, was free to do whatever they wanted to do. And, think of creative ideas and, so many things that Google now has and now that we have in our hands because of Google is because of that 20%, not because of the 80%. It's the creative side. Now, I want to talk about maybe some alternative ways to tap into that creative side of things, to include, mindfulness and meditation, but also potentially, I don't know your history with these. Will and I have both dabbled in psychedelics, and I'm just curious, have you ever used any other modalities, mindfulness, psychedelics, whatever the case may be, to tap into that mindful side, the creative side?
Yeah. Especially if you're somebody like me with ADHD, right? Noise, like mental noise is our biggest problem. Biggest problem. Everywhere I go, I literally have this like little, really expensive earplugs that I have tinnitus too. Mm-hmm. So tinnitus, and actually I had read somewhere that it's common with people that have ADHD, or you're more susceptible to it because it's part of the whole makeup of just too much sensory input, overload, can't deal with what's going on. So I actually bring really nice earplugs with me wherever I go. And 9 times out of 10, when I'm in a public place, I have earplugs in.
Wow.
It's just easier. I can filter things easier, that kind of thing.
I need those for
but
the kids.
I would say because of all that mental noise that comes with ADHD, mindfulness has done a great thing for me in giving me ways to like start to filter that out and block it out so that my brain's only thinking of one thing at a time, or maybe 2 things tops. But this is where the psilocybin comes in for me, microdose specifically. I don't have any problem people doing shrooms and get high and, watching purple dragons and shit waving around in the sky. I don't really care. Everybody, you do you, right? But for me, what I really needed was not to have some tripped out experience at some like stratosphere shaman level, but what I needed was something that would just kind of exist in my body and help reroute energy that was on a merry-go-round that was not productive. Like I'd be stressing about the same thing, or having those conversations in my head about some topic over and over and over. And why? There literally was no output or reason for that. It was just doing that. It's
like an ADHD merry-go-round. You know what I mean? Yeah. Thoughts, feelings. Like I totally feel that, but keep going. Absolutely. Yeah.
Living in that world. And so what psilocybin had done for me at very, very low doses was, without even really feeling high, all of a sudden it accomplished some similar things that I could accomplish through meditation as well. But it took less time, and it was much more of a like direct physiological version of it, where it would take that energy and just bring me super present. So all of a sudden, when it kicked in, I could go outside on a Saturday, and I literally, all I was thinking about was how like colorful the trees were, or the breeze was outside while I was just taking a walk. And then the cool thing is, after it wore off, 4 hours later, whatever, I still carried that same relief with me for the next 5 days.
Wow.
Excellent.
And so if you get on some kind of program experimenting with that or doing that over time and it works for you, doing a microdose psilocybin thing, once every 2 weeks or whatever, it can bring a levity to certain people's lives. And there's all kinds of studies, as you guys are well aware of now, of it being used for people that have heavy, heavy trauma, PTSD. But they have to do like the more hefty version of that experience, to redirect some of that energy and like reprogram those patterns over time. But it grew out of the earth, if you want to bring God into the mix, God created the earth, and the earth has, and the Native Americans knew this, and the Chinese knew this, it grows all the stuff we need to feel better and to provide legit relief for the things we're dealing with, physical, mental ailments, stuff like that. So I'm a huge, huge supporter of that. I'm not a huge supporter of addiction. I'm not a supporter of, people just being high all the time and not getting shit done, not being a good influence on those around them. I do support leveraging what nature's bringing to the table, though, to heal us, basically.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, cannabis is definitely, I mean, when I was a little high the other day writing our book, John. I got a little toke. I'm like, oh, let's tap into the new asshole powers after a little cannabis running through my bloodstream, and I gotta say, I mean, and stuff comes through, like there's also, I think Watson and Crick, I think that those are the guys that found the double helix. It unlocked through an LSD trip. Like there is something, right. So there's something about, I mean, LSD is granted a synthetic, whereas like magic mushrooms or cannabis are organic and come from the earth. But there's something about psychedelics, or just, cannabis isn't really considered a psychedelic, but in some people, I mean, it definitely have psychedelic experiences. What I've learned about those things, it gives you a look behind the curtain of creativity and life that you can't possibly attain just through sobriety. And it's just like, there's another level of creativity that I'm just like, oh, and it's super inspiring too. Maybe that, maybe we shouldn't, I'm not necessarily advocating, do it responsibly is what I'll say. If you're going to go down that path, do it responsibly, check it out for yourself, talk to your doctor, because I think it could be a great way to just enhance creativity if you're stuck somewhere, but also tap into more creativity, because that's been my experience, and it's been well documented throughout history that's been an experience for many, many other people. And some of the advancement we've had in humanity is because of those experiences, which, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, the cannabis thing, my dad, he passed away first week of 2020, right before COVID, basically. Wow. And I'm glad he did. I'm not sure his fragile psyche would have been able to handle everything that COVID brought to the world, as far as just pure, utter chaos and, humans at their best and worst at the same time, but if he would have been alive during a time when cannabis was more prolific and prevalent and legitimized, in our economy and accessible and stuff like that, then he would be alive today, because he basically had a pain med addiction. And he was sober my entire childhood. He was a recovered alcoholic. He stopped drinking before I was born. And then, I think he smoked weed every once in a while, but that's about it. But he got, as his body started to fall apart, getting older, and all of his mental issues that he had, we keep peddling pharmaceuticals. It's like, of course, Big Pharma doesn't want to lose their contract with the VA,
Yeah.
Because they're sure as hell not going to make any money if we start pushing, cannabis as a way for people that have anxiety to relax. We start giving the veterans, that kind of stuff. Oh no, now this asshole who sits at a desk somewhere can't buy his fifth house on an island somewhere because we're not buying all of his frickin' all the opioids that are out there on the market. So, there's so much cultural and corporate pressure to steer away from real solutions to health problems, mental health problems specifically. And we got to all band together to keep pushing that alternative medicine, because it's going to be our downfall, because that's just the biggest problem, is there's certain people trying to get rich off everybody else's health problems.
Yeah.
Mental health is no stranger to that. So,
yeah, for sure.
Well, I think
John,
we're at the hour, coming up on the hour that Rich mentioned he had. So, I'll turn it over to you, Will, to ask maybe one more question, then I'll do the grounding practice and call it done.
Well, I think, why don't we just go one, so if you, kind of talked about how means to kind of open, creativity and access more creativity. And I really like what you said, get out in nature and just start somewhere. Start something that listens to your heart and or that sings to your heart and speaks to your heart, and then start exercising that. And what I like you said also, be shitty. It's it's okay to be shitty. You know what I mean? That's where it all starts. What about if what do you do, or what would you advise other people if they're having some sort of creative block, they're writing some music and they just can't get to the reframe or whatever else is going, or somebody else is writing, something else, or a poem, or stuck on a painting? What do you do to kind of overcome creative blocks, and what would you advise in that realm? And then we can kind of close this out, I think.
Yeah. I would say two things. One would be, give yourself a break sometimes, like from being
be
creative,
kind.
you know,
Okay.
because like sometimes, you know, I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that I'm high output all the time. And so I'll come to the studio and like all these instruments behind me, if one of them is not being used to record something almost every day or every other day, even if it's just for 30 seconds, then I have this little like pressure I put on myself. But then I also start running out of like inspiration because I'm not giving myself time to be inspired by anything new. And so I'll take a break and then like not make any music for like a week. I'll just go do other shit. But then I start missing the studio. And then when I come in, I start hearing new ideas, and all of a sudden I get like the next wave or the next like flush of stuff. So, you know, definitely give yourself a break from it. Don't feel like there's any timeline. There's no expectation you should put on yourself. Other like if it stops bringing you joy, don't do it. Seriously, you know, don't pressure yourself for the sake of pressuring yourself. You know, that would be the first thing. The second thing I thought of, and now I can't fucking remember it because, you know, it's Monday and apparently I haven't had a espresso yet. So, I think it just had to do with making sure that you do not, and I mentioned this earlier, try something new. Like change your, that's what it was. It was change your environment.
There you go.
You know, like for me, my life is it's pretty predictable. I'm very grateful. I have a lot of awesome stuff going on in my life that makes me very happy to be alive. But I would say that I have routines that'll start to just over time, without me realizing, they'll put kind of a wet blanket on my creative inspiration because I'm at home and then I'm at the studio and then I'm back at the house and I'm back at home and then my wife and I will go have a cocktail somewhere. They're back home, they're back to the studio, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not doing shit. And then all of a sudden we'll go somewhere new just for one night. Like we went up to Napa this weekend and we hadn't taken any time for ourselves for a while out in wine country, you know, out in California, and went out there this weekend. And I was like, this environment should not feel like the heroin rush right now that it does. It's really not that far away from my house. Like, and it's just a tree with some sunlight hitting it, but it's new. It was in a new town that I had never been in that had new restaurants and new faces and new sounds and
novelty.
Like break those patterns up, because no matter how great your life is, if you're just doing the same shit constantly, it never gives creativity a chance to do what it do best, which is give you new ideas and newness, you know, which is what makes us fresh as adults. And it helps to get, you know, new experiences and stuff help to yank me out of my Frederick Nietzsche headspace, you know, like I vacillate back and forth between Buddhism and nihilism at least 20 times a day. So
it's probably a good place to be, man. You could really find a middle in that. That's awesome.
Yeah, at the very least, both of those paths strip out an insane amount of bullshit, you know, so I don't stress out about that stuff anymore. But, you know, just making sure you give yourself a fresh environment sometime, you know, try something new. My wife and I, when we get to a weekend, we're the types, we don't map out the plan. Instead, it's like, hey, remember that road that we never drove up before? Let's go do that. And we did that last year. We used to go to this market to pick up food in Corralitos, California. And every time we drive there, we'd always see this road that like went farther around this mountain and this hill. And then one day we decided to go do it, and we did it. And at the very end of it was the entrance to this amazing winery. So we drove into there and we got some wine, just totally off the cuff, spontaneous. And then you walk up to the top of the vineyard and sit there, and you can see the entire freaking valley out there. Nice. We're like, what? And it's all because we spontaneously decided to go check out a road we hadn't traveled yet.
Yeah.
You know? So it's better to regret something you did than something you did not do.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that.
Rich, thanks, brother. This has been awesome. For our audience who may want to get a hold of you after this, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, for sure. You can reach me at rich at souleffective.com, souleffective.com. Sorry that that's so long, but you know, that's the name of my studio, my business is my artist name. And so hit me there, or souleffective.com. You know, there's a contact page on there as well. And then I'm floating around LinkedIn and, you know, all that stuff too. Yeah.
Right on, man.
Awesome.
Well, I hope that
Excellent.
they will reach out to you, because they may need to tap into their creativity and find out ways to do that, or maybe have you do an intro and outro for their podcast.
Or hey, you can listen to Rich's. I'm sorry, Rich. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just so everybody knows, like, that's one of the other things that helps to unlock creativity for me is volunteering my time and skills to help others that are doing good for others.
Yeah.
So that was the entire impetus for
we
me
appreciate
to reach
that.
out to you guys. You know, I remember John put out his best attempt at like a video intro for the show. And I was like, man, these guys are doing such cool shit for so many people. Their intentions are to convert that negative energy in the universe and put it back out as positive. And I have these video skills and I can crank something out super fast for these guys. Let's just reach out and do it. So that's where that came from. But that also is what makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It's a healing practice for my own trauma to help
For sure.
others, but also it facilitates creativity. So help other people. But if you have special skill set that, you know, some people can use and they just need that extra hour of expertise you put in there, consider that your tithing. You know, people that go to church, they tithe and put money in a basket. For me, my tithing is trying to lift up others with no expectation of anything in return other than just seeing it help more people beyond that.
Well, we appreciate you, brother. And you know, that's one of the reasons we do this show too, is it's part of mine and Will's own healing journey or exploration or whatever you want to call it, because it does feel good to give back. So I appreciate you and your giving back to us and enhancing our ability to give back to our listeners. So that said, I'm going to give back by leading this final closing practice, and we'll wrap it up. Okay. So go ahead and get comfortable, whatever that looks like and feels like for you, whatever is safe and comfortable. And just go ahead and bring your attention intentionally to your breath, not feeling the need to force it, but just focusing on the physical aspects of your breath. The rise and fall of your diaphragm, the expansion and contraction of your belly and your chest. The cool air passing in on the inhalation and the warm air passing out on the exhalation. And with creativity in mind, we're just going to be still and quiet just for a moment. We very rarely take time to be still and quiet, so we're going to do that now. And we'll close with one deep cleansing breath together. Begin by emptying your lungs. Bring your navel to your spine, really squeezing out your lungs, and deep breath in. All the way up, filling up from the bottom to the top. Hold at the top and release. And as you release, start to do those micro movements and bring your eyes back open or refocused. And if that was your only time of peace for the day, I hope that was helpful. Otherwise, I hope that it is one of many fantastic times of peace and quiet in your day. Rich, thank you so much for being here with us today, brother. Fantastic episode, really great information. And we loved having you. Love everything that you're about, brother. I'll turn it over.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah. Hey, thank you everyone for tuning in. Rich, thank you so much for talking about creativity. And honestly, this show is literally art in action. Like, we are creating the show and continually enhancing the show all the time. So we really, really thank you for your support. Please leave us a review. Please share it on your social media. Please follow us on Instagram. Help us grow, because it's our passion and our mission to help other people discover more mindfulness, to live happier and healthier and more, mentally healthier lives. So Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys. And this is really brings a big smile on my face. I'll be beaming like a ray of sunshine the rest of the day. Thanks, guys.
Until next time, take care, everyone. Peace.
Thanks, Rich.
And here is Rich with our closing video. Take care.
Oh,
everyone.
awesome. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.